My name is Janaka Bowman Lewis. My pronouns are she and her. I am a mother, a daughter, a partner, a sister, a friend, an educator. And I also tell Black women's stories, and it's my pleasure to share these stories with you today. Have you ever had a treasure box? One where you put small, special, precious things, slips of paper, secrets, shiny, sparkly things. In my mind, I had one that was purple, and it was filled with jewels. Well, first, they were toy jewels, and later on, rings and things that were passed on from my family. I had my mother's class ring in there, and I thought all of those things were really special. And so my life was comprised of their pieces before even my own. We dream in pieces. And so, as I think about Black women's narratives and how we think about being the sick and tired of the sick and tired, and being the ones, as Sophia said, in the color purple, all my life I had to fight, I want to use this time to expand the ideas of what matters when we think about Black women's lives. So, I was born in the 1980s, and I had a Fisher-Price microphone. And in it, I would sing songs like Madonna's Material Girl, because we are living in a material world, and I am a material girl. You know, we're living in a material world, and I am a material girl. And I also sang Whitney Houston and Michael Jackson. But somehow I never thought that I, as a young Black girl, could be material in the same way as those I saw on TV. And I wanted my life to matter in the same ways that their lives mattered. Our dreams matter. My parents were born in the 1950s, and their parents came of age in the 1930s and the 1940s. My maternal grandmother, Magnolia, her real beautiful name, worked at a clock factory in Athens, Georgia for years. And then she started to bake and worked at a country club in Athens. And people would come from all over to the country club, those who had access to eat her delicious baked goods. And then as a senior adult, she decided to start her own business, Magnolia's Bake Shop, and she carried on that legacy until she retired several years ago. My paternal grandmother, Vanilla, also her real beautiful name, grew up and raised my father in Thomasville, Georgia, South Georgia. And then she decided as an adult, while my grandfather fought overseas, to go to college. And she decided to go to college while raising two young children, my father, Mac Bowman, and my late aunt, Clara Bowman, at Albany State College and at Albany State University in Albany, Georgia, in a place where Dr. Martin Luther King called one of the most racist places in America. My grandmother walked my father and my aunt to see Dr. King. They walked everywhere in Albany because my grandmother refused to let my father and my aunt ride on segregated buses. And this was even after the Montgomery bus boycotts of 1955 and 1956. And so they walked to Shiloh Baptist Church, where Dr. King spoke in 1961. And all my father remembers about that day, which he wrote about, and I had the opportunity to edit in this book, Dr. King is Tired Too, is how tired Dr. King looked because he had to fight so hard. And my father remembers thinking, I'm tired, and Dr. King is tired too. Our dreams matter, and it mattered to my grandmother who wanted my father and my aunt to see this person that was creating bigger dreams for them, as my grandmothers, as my mother, as my parents have done for me. And so I tell these stories, and I tell stories of Black women in my book, Freedom Narratives of African American Women. I tell the stories of 1773, Phyllis Wheatley writing her poems, and she was an enslaved Black woman. And she decided to tell her story anyway, even though it had to go through several white men who had to sign off on her writing. And she still didn't own the rights to her own body or her own work. I tell the story of Maria Stewart, who in the 1830s was an activist and a speaker, and she went around talking about Black women's rights. And then we get to the 1960s and the 1970s, where we have Black women who are recentering their own narratives. We have the narrative of Angela Davis. We have Audre Lorde, who writes her own narrative of growing up as a queer Black woman. We have Toni Morrison, who's telling the story in The Bluest Eye of Pecola Breedlove, who just wanted blue eyes to make her life better. And so we have this idea of recentering narratives and telling stories. And we also have, in 1974, Ntozake Shange, who is a playwright and wrote For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. Her Lady in Green said, "Somebody almost walked off with all of my stuff. Not just a poem or a dance I left in the street, but somebody almost walked off with all of my stuff." And then says, "It's my stuff. You have to give it to me. I'm the only one who can handle it." And so the matter with Black women and the material of Black women is the ability to tell our own stuff, to tell our own stories, and to tell our own lives, as women have been doing, Black women have been doing throughout time, often without the recognition. And so, as we think about this idea of our stuff and our material, I want us to think about what we hold on to and the narratives that we center. When we think of the phrase Black Lives Matter, that came from a movement begun in 2014, 2015 by Black and queer women, Patrisse Khan-Cullors, Alicia Garza, and Opal Tometi, after the tragic deaths of Michael Brown in 2014, of Tamir Rice in 2014, of Trayvon Martin in 2012. We still aren't necessarily thinking about the pain in Black women's lives, even as we think about the pain that their mothers hold. We aren't thinking about those narratives of these women that were interrupted by the loss of their children. Even in 2020, as we think about the tragic murder of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, we also have to be thinking about the loss of Breonna Taylor. And even here in Charlotte, the loss of Black trans woman Monica Diamond. And we aren't thinking about those stories. We aren't thinking about those narratives. We aren't thinking about the ways in which those lives matter and were taken away by those that did not value them. We have to think about the idea that those materials, that material, that stuff, were things that matter to them. Their lives matter to them and should also matter to us. We carry this stuff. We carry these stories. Last year, I moved for about the fourth or fifth time as an adult, and I hate moving, y'all. It's terrible. And so I was moving with my family, and we were trying to come up with these rules of what we should keep and what we should let go. And first we just said, all right, whatever fits somewhere we can keep. And then we said, well, okay, we can keep the stuff we really love that fits, right? And then we were like, all right, just put it somewhere, just throw it somewhere. And so that's what we did. And so as I went through stuff preparing to move, there were buttons, there were figurines, my 8-year-old daughter's dolls. We were like, okay, which ones are dressed, which ones, and we just were like, we'll keep all of them. There were T-shirts with Black women who mattered to me. And so we just decided to keep the stuff that we can handle. As Ntozake Shange's Lady in Green said, if it's really my stuff, you gotta give it to me. I'm the only one can handle it. And so I'm always thinking about what we can handle and the material and the matter of Black women's lives, even when the world is not looking at their lives. And so ultimately, we want our dreams, we want our joy, we want our pain, and even as Crunk Feminist Collective author Brittany Cooper says, our eloquent rage. We want things to matter, as do all of the other things in our lives. I am a Black women's archive, and I tell stories about Black women's lives. Thank you.